So today we're going to be looking at how to change the front discs and pads on my Mk2 Audi TT 3.2 Quattro. The discs were an advisory on last year's MOT, so I've already done the driver's side, and I'm not sure if you'll see on the video very well, but there's an absolutely massive groove in the back of the disc. So I've done the discs and pads on the driver's side, so we're now going to do the passenger side. So obviously the first thing to do is to get the car off the ground and take the wheel off. I'm probably not going to video how to do that bit. If you're not sure how to take the wheel off, you probably shouldn't be messing with the brakes, so part 2 will be with the wheel off. Everyone, once you've got the car off the ground and the wheel off, the next thing you're going to need to remove is the pad retaining clamp, or spring, whatever you want to call it. That sits on the front of the caliper. I meant to film this but managed to forget, so that would be sat on the car like that. You can remove that with a couple of screwdrivers and a lot of swearing. And then the next thing you need to undo, and don't worry about anything else at this stage, is you'll feel around the back there are 2 plastic covers which are covering the caliper slide bolts. So you'll know which are the right ones to undo because they're the only thing with the plastic cover behind them. Once we get that off, so that's the plastic cover there, and what you're going to want to undo that is a Torx bit. This is a T45 bit, and then you want to undo both of those screws that are both of the sliding bolts that are covered by those plastic caps. You don't have to remove them all the way out, I don't believe, but I typically do, so we'll get those out. So that took a little bit longer than I would have hoped, because I don't know if you can see, but this Torx bit that I'm using here is a little bit too thick. So basically you've got the Torx bit in the screw there, and this brake pipe's actually very slightly in the way, so it's a little bit awkward, so I just have to give it a little tap in with the hammer. So that's what the slider bolts should look like once you've got them out. So the next thing to do is remove the caliper, and for that the best thing I find to do is first of all tap a screwdriver between the pad and the disc. You're throwing them away anyway, so it doesn't matter. Wiggle that around a bit to loosen the pad from the disc, and then the caliper should just lift off. The next thing you're going to want to do when you've removed the caliper is make sure it's supported. Don't leave it dangling on the brake pipe. So for this I'm going to use a ratchet, 2 hooks. Basically you can use anything with 2 hooks on, and make sure you hook the caliper onto something like the suspension or something, like I say, to make sure it's not on the brake pipe. Next thing you're going to want to do is remove the pads and the brake pad wear sensor. So I've already just basically pulled the pad, the one that's left in the caliper, pull it out. The other pad that's left on can just be removed, and then you want to basically pull this clip down on the sensor here, give it a wiggle, and that clips off. So the pads are now removed. Next thing we need to do is remove the 2 21mm caliper carrier bolts, which are here and here. I'm using a impact socket with a Milwaukee breaker bar. I've also put penetrating fluid on as well. Be my guest to try this with a normal ratchet, however from experience these are generally very tight, so we'll have a go at getting these undone, and then obviously just be careful that once you undo the second one the caliper carrier is going to fall off. So the next thing you need to do is remove this is going to be the most entertaining part of the whole video, remove this pesky little torque bit here, which will almost certainly be rusted on to the point where you can't get it off, and it will just round off the head. So I've already sprayed penetrating fluid, I've already smacked it with the hammer. Some people say using an impact driver helps. I don't find that you can ever get these off when they're rusted on, so for a laugh we'll try and undo it. Failing that, we're going to basically drill it out. So as long as you're careful when you're drilling, you can drill the head out. You may be able to rescue the thread behind. If not, I tend not to worry. At the end of the day, this screw is only here to line the disc up with the hub, so you can live without it. You've just got to make sure that when you put the disc back on, it goes on properly, and it just makes putting the wheel back on a little bit more difficult because you've got to line the wheel hole up with the disc, with the hub. But other than that, it's not absolutely essential. You'll also see here I've got a like a hub spacer on anyway, because I've got aftermarket wheels that were on the vehicle when I bought it, so that actually does hold the disc in place anyway. So we'll have one go at undoing it. If not, we will be drilling it. So I don't know if you can see, but after one go it's already rounded off as suspected, so time for the drill. So if our drilling has been successful, we should now be able to give the disc a few clouts with the hammer and it should come free. So fingers crossed. I'm not cutting any bits out of this video because I'm sure it'll be entertaining for people when it all goes wrong. So as you can see there, the disc's fallen out, albeit it's fell onto the drill, but never mind, that drill's about 20 years old and nothing seems to be able to finish it off. So the next thing you want to do, and I tend to use this new WD-40 fast release penetrant because it's what was to hand. I think I said in a previous video we're moving house shortly, so half of my stuff's packed away, so we're going to use this for today. We're going to give the hub a bit of a dousing. I'll get the wire brush, clean it up a little bit and get ready for the new disc going on. Just worth noting, now that we're halfway through the video, I'm not a professional mechanic obviously, so I'm sure there are better ways of doing these things. I'm just filming it from an amateur's point of view, and hopefully if anyone else is going to give it a go, it'll give you some helpful tips. So we'll clean this up, and the next thing we'll do is put the new disc in place. Brembo disc, which I was lucky enough to get from Euro Car Parts during the 50% off sale, so happy with that. So this is a new Brembo disc slid back onto the hub. I'm lucky enough to be using this hub spacer here for the aftermarket wheels, like I say, so that's able to grip the disc in the absence of the screw that we've just drilled back out to keep the holes all in line. If you have knackered the screw and aren't using one of these, just put a wheel nut temporarily back in the hole there to stop the disc constantly flying off. So the next thing we need to do is put the caliper carrier back on that we removed earlier. I'm going to have to look at what spec they need to be tightened to later with the torque wrench, but the answer is very, because you obviously don't want those to fall off the car. The other thing you'll notice in this video, for those of you that are paying attention, is the absence of me using copper slip, and that's because I've packed it and can't find it. So in an ideal world you want to be using a little bit of copper slip, probably behind the disc here, on the back of the pads, things like that, to stop things binding together, squeaking and all that kind of stuff. But we're going to risk it without. I'll probably take it all back to part and put some on at a later date when we've moved house. So yeah, we'll get the caliper carrier back on. So we've now got the carrier back on the car, done those bolts up very tightly. Like I say, I'll have to look what they should be torqued up to later. For the mechanics amongst you, just to keep you happy, another piece of advice might be just to put a bit of thread lock on those, because you really don't want them coming undone. Again, because of moving house, I can't find any, so it'll be something to revisit at a later date. This car's not used every day, it's used at weekends anyway. We probably won't be going out in it before we move. So what do we want to do next? The next thing we need to do is to push the piston back in the caliper to accommodate the new thicker pads. The pads weren't particularly worn on the front of this car anyway, it was just the discs. Somebody decided not to replace the discs, put new pads on, and they've subsequently got massive grooves in them. So you do really need the specific tool for doing this, for pushing the piston back in the caliper. Don't bother trying to do it with screwdrivers and things like that. I believe on the front of this vehicle they push back, and on the back you have to wind them. So I'm just going to go and get the right bit and then we'll be back. So to push the piston back in, you need a tool that looks like this. And I'm not going to time lapse this bit because it's probably one of the trickier bits if you've never done it before. Obviously, if you're used to pushing the piston back in, then feel free to skip this part. Hopefully you can see, and I'm not blocking the camera all the way through. If you can't see and I am blocking the camera, or I've accidentally nudged it, then apologies, you'll be watching absolutely nothing at the moment. Does help if you can remember your left and right whilst doing this, otherwise you waste a hell of a lot of time screwing things the wrong way like me. One thing I would say is these things are never as easy as when you watch videos where proper mechanics are doing them and everything takes them 2 seconds and you've changed the whole pads and discs in 5 minutes. I've never ever found that to be the case. So once you've got the tool tightened on the piston like that, you do need to make sure it's straight. You just slowly increase the pressure. I've also forgot to mention that I've taken the top off of the brake fluid reservoir to do this. So like I say, I think I've only needed to push the piston back a tiny little bit to accommodate the new pads because they're already relatively new, so don't overdo it. We'll see if that's enough. So you want to take the tool back off. Managed not to swear so far through this video, which is pretty impressive for me. So I'll be back with you in a second when I've got this off. Next thing we're going to do, which is a bit of trial and error, is put the pads on. So first pad, one without the sensor, goes on here. Oh, it's worth noting by the way as well, on this particular car it's only the passenger side that's got the sensor, not the driver's side. So if you're doing the driver's side following this same video, don't panic that you've not got a sensor. And then this one with the clips on the back goes inside the piston. Obviously make sure you've got it the right way. As you could see there, it's another one of those jobs where if you did it for a living it'd take you 1 second. If you're amateur it takes you a little bit longer. So I've just got to work out, we'll put the caliper back on now and I'll film it real time. We've just got to work out just where this wire should go to make sure it shouldn't get trapped. Obviously I know where it plugs back in up here, but I'm not sure whether it should feed through there or just be loose. So we'll see when we put the caliper back on, hoping that we've wound the piston back in enough. So obviously we'll take it off of its hook and see if we can slide it back on. So the wire for the sensor sort of comes out of the side and then up. If you're doing this for yourself, you'd see it's fairly obvious how it goes. Obviously we're just going to plug this back in. That's back on. So the next thing we need to do, which for me is the most annoying job by far, so if anybody can tell me an easier way of doing this I'd be very grateful, which is putting the caliper slider bolts back in, which I'm definitely going to film on time lapse because when I did the other side it was a nightmare. So basically the problem is you can get them in the hole like that, but then just trying to line them up and make sure all the calipers in line is a bit of trial and error really, so you just generally have to keep twisting it until you sort of feel it grip in the thread. It's a bit potluck when I did the driver's side. The bottom one I found in about 2 seconds, the top took me about 5 minutes, so just a bit of trial and error. When you're screwing them in as well, these don't need to be massively tight, so just hand tight, otherwise you will strip the thread, which is a mistake I've made before. Again, you might want a bit of thread lock in those if you've got some and you're not in the middle of moving house. So we'll put these in. I'll do a time lapse, probably have to put it on ×10 speed because it'll take me so long, and then we'll see what's left to do. So we're nearly done now. The next thing to do is to put the plastic caps back on the where the caliper sliding bolts go in. Hopefully you've not lost them like I just did, so spent about 15 minutes looking for one of them. And then the final thing to do, which again I'll film on time lapse because I'm sure I haven't got the knack of it, so it takes me absolutely ages, is to put the nightmare pad retaining clip back on, which goes like that. If you had 2 eyes before you started putting that back on, you'll probably only have 1 by the time you've got it back on. So I'll film that on time lapse and then we'll about be done. Turns out that wasn't too bad to get back on in the end. So as you can see, job now complete. Put the wheel back on, drop the car, drive it around the block. Hopefully you'll stop at the end of the road because you've done it properly, and that's done. If you enjoyed this video, I'm going to do the back brakes discs and pads shortly, so please do like and subscribe, and anything else I get up to with the car I'll film. Thanks for watching.